and welcome to my channel. This is where I talk about all things bookish, writing, and I make sarcastic comments along the way. Today we're in the reading room, so I'm going to recap what I read in January, and we'll share some quick reviews along the way. So, spoiler alert, I will be talking about major plot points and twists in these books, so if you haven't read them yet, might want to switch off. Also, I do want to say that these reviews are strictly about the books, not about the authors. I respect these authors for doing the work and putting their books out there. My reviews are not about them as people, but about the books that I read that were written by them. So first up, we have One Last Chance by Jeffrey Siger. I apologize, I am probably butchering your last name. But I did get this one from my subscription with the book drop, and the synopsis did not really push it to the top of my to-be-read list. I finally got around to it after getting home from Christmas with the family, and it kind of was just meh. In actuality, I was reading it whenever I had a spare moment, just so I could be done with it and move on to something else. I have a very hard time DNFing books, so I kind of had to trudge through this one. So let's give the back book cover copy a read, just so you can kind of see what you're in for. So, welcome to the island where people forget to die. When Chief Inspector Andreas Caldis's longtime assistant, Maggie, returns to her ancestral home on Icaria, I apologize, for her 104-year-old grandmother's funeral, her grief quickly turns to suspicion. Not only had her Yaya been in good health just a week before her death, but there are bruises on her arm that suggest a botched IV insertion that no one can explain. While chatting with the savant Troya, who prepared Yaya's body for burial, Maggie learns that several other long-lived Cariots have recently died under the same questionable circumstances. Back in Athens, Andreas and his chief detective, Yanni, pursue a smuggling and protection ring embedded in the Greek DEA and its possible involvement in the assassination of an undercover cop. As leads in the elder killings on Icaria and the DEA corruption case converge, Andreas and his crew realize there are international intrigues at play that might well stretch beyond the reach of law. While they race to prevent yet another untimely death, Maggie's faith in humanity, the church, and the very legal system she serves are tested in ways she could never have imagined. Can her boss's Hail Mary pass at securing justice for the victims hope to hit its mark? So this book is set in Greece, and I really thought that would help draw me in a little bit, and the descriptions of Greece are very beautiful. It does make me want to go there. But I did not know going into this that this is part of a series, and this is something like book 12 in that series. And so it didn't really help me, as some of the setup for the characterizations or the characters were implied from previous books. So I don't know these characters, but they were written like I should know them. Another thing, the plot was kind of funny, but it wasn't set up to be funny. It's not supposed to be a comedy. Spoiler alert, the twist is that the old people are dying because someone thinks the cure to illnesses could be in their blood, seeing as they've lived through 2 pandemics. I guess it's a plot, but it was kind of weak to me, and some of the points that happen in the story require a huge suspension of disbelief that I just really wasn't willing to give it. And overall, it had a very slow pace. It was slow moving. Again, this was a book that I read just so I could move on to the next one. Another quick note on this one was also just some of the dialogue I noticed read kind of weird, and it read very much like a blog like 101, how not to do dialogue. Like, I put a bookmark in. So there's a lot of the dialogue uses the character names, which can be good, but not when it's already established who's only in the conversation. Like, there's a scene where there's 3 people in the conversation, you know who they are, and anytime someone talks to Maggie, they say her name. Like, okay, Maggie, your turn. And then, Maggie, let's be realistic here. We need a motive. Maggie, can you think of anyone who you spoke with who might be able to shed some light on how the priest could be connected to the IV bruising? Nobody says a person's name that many times in a conversation, and just little tiny things like that kind of brought me out of the story. And again, it goes back to the characterizations. Maybe if I knew these characters, had gone along all of their stories with them, I'd be a lot more invested in it. But I wasn't, and honestly, Maggie as a protagonist seemed kind of weak. I did read a Goodreads review where somebody else did mention that she is not the strongest of the series, and that the story just didn't play out as well as others have. So next on my January reads was The Personal Assistant by Kimberly Belle. This was also a book drop pick, and I liked it a lot better than The Last Chance. So the premise of this one: when Alex first began posting unscripted family moments and motivational messages online, she had no intention of becoming an influencer. Overnight, it seems she's amassed a huge following, and her hobby became a full-time job. One she couldn't manage without her sharp as a tack personal assistant, AC. But all the goodwill of her followers turns toxic when one controversial post goes viral in the worst possible way. Alex reaches out to AC for damage control, but her assistant has gone silent. This young woman Alex trusted with all her secrets, who had access to her personal information and a front row seat to the pressure points in her marriage and family life, is now missing. And the police are looking to Alex and her husband for answers. As Alex digs into AC's identity, and a woman is found murdered, she'll learn that the greatest threat isn't online, but in her own living room. So that's The Personal Assistant by Kimberly Belle. So I will say, if you want to get really drunk while reading this book, take a shot for every time you read the word troll. Well, actually, please don't do that because you'll be dead as you finish chapter 3 and are taking your 7th shot. The plot was a bit of a roller coaster, and I wasn't sure how it'd play out in the end. There were some good twists that were written well and made sense within the story, and the red herrings actually worked pretty well here. I really hate when stories rely on red herrings or misdirection just for the sake of misdirecting you. I'm looking at you, an unwanted guest. It was a very quick read, and definitely did a good job at looking at influencers, celebrities, and cancel culture. I would definitely give Belle's work another read, as her writing really did pull me in. Overall, not a bad read, but I do have a few lingering questions. So Nina, AC, how did Nina find out the truth about her biological mom if she was abandoned? Who told her all of this backstory so she could concoct this plot? Why was Nina so obsessed with becoming like Alex? Will we ever find out why she was dressing like her or mimicking her voice? Or was it just a misdirect so you didn't really see what was going on? There was also a huge fear of Alex of guns, and we don't really ever get a clear answer of what happened to her to make her so scared of guns. I had assumed it had something to do with the twins' biological father, but we never find out, or perhaps I fell asleep during that explanation. And then also, why did Nina/AC disappear right after Alex's post? Was it just great convenient timing? Because we end up finding out that one of the twins, Penelope, was the one who posted the scandalous post. So unless Nina knew that that had happened, it doesn't make sense, again, besides plot contrivance, that she disappears at that time. So next up on my January reads was Reputation by Lex Croucher. And I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. I believe I got this one in an unplugged book box, and I actually really liked this one. So let's take a look at the back cover copy and premise. So bookish, sheltered Georgiana Ellers is spending the summer with her aunt and uncle at their English countryside home. At a particularly dull party, she meets the enigmatic Frances Campbell, a member of the upper echelons of Regency society who delights Georgiana with her disregard for politeness and propriety. Georgiana quickly falls in with Frances and her friends, who introduce her to a world of drunken debauchery and lavish parties. When she meets the seemingly quiet and straight-laced Thomas Huxley, sparks fly. But Thomas seems unimpressed with the company she keeps. Soon, Georgiana begins to wonder if the price to enter this world will be higher than she can afford to pay. Set in a time when one's reputation was everything, this hilarious debut explores sex, belonging, and the status through the eyes of the unforgettable heroine whom Jane Austen herself would have cheered for. And I kind of agree. I love Pride and Prejudice and Emma by Jane Austen, and this was that meets Mean Girls. I mean, there's literally a line in the book that says, "Get in, Georgiana, we're going shopping." A little on the nose, but still pretty funny. So saying that, it does set the book up to include some anachronisms and behavior that probably wasn't happening back in that Regency period, but if you're able to look past that and just kind of have some fun with the story, it's a pretty good read. I actually felt like I was watching Marie Antoinette while reading it. It's very colorful, sinful, and that side of women coming into adulthood that we don't normally show. I enjoyed it, though I do think the ending was a bit abrupt, but in a way it's kind of like the ending of Emma. Things just worked out well for our protagonist, even though she made some questionable choices and treated some characters terribly. Like, honestly, Betty should have spit in Georgiana's tea, for real. I did like Georgiana's relationship with Thomas, and I really liked their correspondence. Like, their letters between each other was very cute. I do think it could have been built up a bit more, but I still liked that he was willing to be vulnerable with her and share more details about why he is the way he is and why he does look down on the behavior that she is falling into. And then I also like the diversity of the cast, though I wish it was explored a bit more in depth. It was interesting to see as Frances is the Regina George character in Queen Bee, but she has her own familial problems that she has to deal with and racial issues, even though she has a lot of privilege for that time. She does talk about slaves at one point, but that conversation just kind of felt forced, and then it just dwindles to nothing and it's never brought up again. Even the subplot of her mother was kind of only skin deep. There was a chance to explore it further, but it wasn't. I get the inclusion of these subplots and ideas to show that that era wasn't as whitewashed as it's typically portrayed, but then discuss it, talk about it, make it an actual part of the story instead of just, well, I acknowledged it and we're moving on. I also did like that there's queer representation that added some dimension, especially as one of the characters was out more than the other, or at least as out as possible given that this is based on Regency fiction. But even that character, laments that he can never fully be himself like his friends can be. His happily ever after doesn't look the same as the women of the time. I will say the book does explore darker topics, so trigger warnings for sexual assault and rape, but overall, besides those, this was a pretty fast, light read that I actually really enjoyed. It's a unique blend of contemporary and modern storylines set against a period setting that do a good job of showing that some themes and stories are essentially timeless. So next up, we have No One Will Miss Her by Kat Rosenfield. So this was actually an impulse buy over Christmas break. My husband and I were out shopping for a white elephant gift, and it might end up being a white elephant gift next year from me. I did not enjoy this. So the premise of No One Will Miss Her is, on an October morning, a homicide investigator pulls into the hard-luck town of Copper Falls, Maine. The junkyard is burning, and the local pariah, Lizzie Ouellette, is dead, with her husband Dwayne nowhere to be found. Adrienne Richards, blonde and fabulous social media influencer and wife of a disgraced billionaire, had been renting Lizzie's tiny lake house as a country getaway, even though Copper Falls is anything but a resort town. As Adrienne's connection to the case becomes clear, so too does her connection to Lizzie, who narrates their story from beyond the grave. The women navigate a relationship that cuts across class boundaries, transactional, complicated, and finally, deadly. A gone girl for the gig economy, this is a story of privilege and identity as two devious women from opposite worlds discover the dangers of coveting someone else's life. Sounds pretty interesting. A lot of that synopsis or the back cover copy doesn't really play out. I will say the suspension of disbelief required for this plot to work could hold up a bridge to Mars. You were telling me in the year of our Lord 2021, when this was published, that there's no forensic testing done to confirm a decedent's identity? They see a mole on her boob and go, yep, that's her. Seriously, nobody thought to take fingerprints, check DNA, pull some hair out. Also on this, the twist was kind of meh, and you could see it coming, even though it is completely unbelievable. And I mean literally unbelievable. Spoiler alert, Lizzie killed Adrienne and then cut off her own boob mole to superglue it onto Adrienne. What in the what? I mean, even after the twist is revealed, there's not much substance left to carry the story, but I am just sitting here reading. We just read a book about someone cutting off a mole from their boob and gluing it onto somebody else, hoping that they can get away with murder. I also then have to question, what exactly is Lizzie's plan? Does she know Adrienne's social security number? Does Adrienne not have any friends who will take one good hard look at Lizzie and realize that they're not the same person? How did Bird, the cop in the story, not realize? It almost felt like Rosenfield wanted it both ways, that Lizzie was such a non-entity that people in town treated her like shit, but then she's also a dead ringer for Adrienne. Honestly, no pun intended on that one, but you don't get it both ways. I also have to question all the asides to baseball in this book. It kind of got tedious after a while. Like, it kind of comes out of nowhere, and then it carries the last half of the book. Like, they're listening to this baseball game on the radio, both characters, like, at the same time. But since when do they care about it? The characters didn't seem to care about it before, but it kind of felt like Rosenfield felt that she needed to throw in some characterization for both Lizzie and Bird, and that was what she went with. They both listened to a baseball game on the radio. That's not characterization. This was a distraction and just a chance to pad out the word count. Speaking of things that don't add much to the story besides words, was what the hell was up with Bird's sudden, and I mean very sudden, cold case he was working at the end. We heard no hints of him struggling with this case or thinking about it offhandedly, and suddenly there it is. It felt like some of the things that were added to the story didn't really add anything to the experience of reading the book. Also, trigger warning on this book for animal abuse that, in my opinion, was pretty unnecessary. As soon as I started reading the scene, my stomach just clenched and I knew what was going to happen and I couldn't read it. I literally had to skip over it as soon as I saw specific words, and there was no reason that this cat had to be abused this way. Something else could have been done by Dwayne to paint the picture of how terrible he is. Now, to her credit, Rosenfield is a strong writer and can craft some powerful paragraphs, but after a while, my eyes were kind of glazing over. I don't need tons of paragraphs of inner monologues of Lizzie telling me exactly who she is, who Adrian is, who Dwayne is. After what Dwayne did to her when they were kids with the cat, I was appalled she even gave him the time of day, let alone sleep with him and then marry him. But Rosenfield does do a good job of pointing out the hypocrisy of the small town berating and blaming the woman for getting pregnant and ruining a man's life, instead of acknowledging that he obviously had a hand in it too. She did not get pregnant by herself, so let's hold him accountable as well. I also have to say, I'm curious how this was classified as a thriller, as there are no thrills to be had. It was more of a character study. If that's your jam, you might like it, but it wasn't for me. I'd actually compare this to Lisa Jewell's works and her domestic thrillers. It's a lot more introspective and examining human nature and behavior than a twisty McFisty thriller. I have to laugh at the quote on the cover. It's blade sharp, whip smart, and genuinely original. A thriller to refresh your belief that a story can still outpace and outsmart you. By A.J. Finn. Really? This book was supposed to refresh my faith in the genre. It refreshed my faith that bad books can still get published, and there's hope for me yet. But I also hate A.J. Finn and the trash fire that was The Woman in the Window, so screw you. I don't care what you have to say about this book. Next up was a piece of nonfiction, kind of the self-help genre, so The Pursuit of Excellence by Ryan Hawk. Honestly, I really did not like this one. So I do enjoy peppering my reading list with some self-improvement and motivational books. Last year, I actually read James Clear's Atomic Habits, which was obviously where this idea kind of came from for this one, but he did not nail it. Where James Clear tells stories to illustrate a point he's making, Hawk tells stories to tell stories and anecdotes and talk about the cool people he knows. For me, it just landed poorly, and I found myself getting quite bored with it, especially, again, comparing to Clear, like he would tell a story to open the chapter, get you hyped up, and then dive into the work or the exercises that you need to do to put that story to work. Hawk starts with a story, and then he tells you about someone else, and then there's another story, and oh yeah, did you know that his dad is really cool and got this, party, and oh, he also knows this really famous person? Okay, cool. No offense to Hawk, because I'm sure he, is a really cool guy, as is the rest of his family, but I don't know. It did not work for me, and kind of like the first book on this list, I was speed reading through it just to finish it, and I honestly don't remember many of the key takeaways just because I was bored. All right, so lastly, we have 100 Other Girls by Iman Hariri-Kia. And I so wanted to love this based on the premise and similarities to The Devil Wears Prada, and especially the New York setting, since I had just been there back in early December. But there were some serious issues with this book. I'm going to do a more in-depth review for my wine club playlist, but this one was disappointing. So let's actually go over the premise of this one. So Nora's life is a little off track. She's an inspiring writer and amateur blogger in New York, which is a nice way of saying that she tutors the rich Upper East Side kids and is currently crashing on her sister's couch. But that's okay. Nora has Layla, who has always been her rock, and now she has another major influence to lean on, Vinyl magazine. The pages of Vinyl practically raise Nora, teaching her everything from how to properly insert a tampon to which political ideologies she subscribes to. So when she lands a highly coveted job as assistant to Loretta James, Vinyl's iconic editor-in-chief, Nora can't believe her luck. Her only dream is to write for Vinyl, and now with her foot firmly in the door and the Loretta James as her mentor, Nora is finally on the right path. Or so she thinks. Loretta is an unhinged nightmare, insecure and desperate to remain relevant in an evolving media landscape she doesn't understand. Nora's phone buzzes constantly with Loretta's bizarre demands, particularly with tasks Loretta hopes will undermine the success of Vinyl's wonderkind, digital director Jade Aki. The reality of Nora's job is nothing like she expected, and a misguided crush on the hot IT guy only threatens to complicate things even more. But as Loretta and the old-school print team enter into a turf war with Jade and the woke for the wrong reasons digital team, Nora soon finds herself caught in the middle, and with her dream job on the line, she'll need to either choose a side or form her own. Clever, incisive, and thoroughly fun, 100 Other Girls is an insider's take on the changing media industry, an ode to sisterhood, and a profound exploration of what it means to chase your dreams. I wish it was. I really wish it had been a true ode of what it means to chase your dreams, but I don't know what Nora's dreams were. To be fair, this book started out strong, had some really great writing, especially when describing the city. But then there was writing like, my mind runs faster than BuzzFeed pumps out listicles. Okay. The other thing that I did like about this book was that the cast was pretty diverse and that it didn't feel like it was just there to check off a box. They were all simply people living their lives. I also really like that it had lots of women, especially showing women in positions of power at the magazine. We definitely need more of that. Now on to the bad things. So I don't understand the point of the story. What did Nora learn? How has Nora changed? She said she wanted to be a writer, but we rarely see her writing. And when she finally does write this amazing article, we don't even get to see it. What the hell? I am keeping this author in mind, as this was her debut novel, and I do think she has some skill, and I wouldn't say no to reading the work she puts out in the future. Like I said, a longer review will be made for this title. So I do want to reiterate again that my reviews aren't meant to be mean or attack the authors, but simply a review of the books and my thoughts on them. So have you read any of the books I covered today? Tell me in the comments what you thought about them, and thanks for watching!